Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, this is at the White House press briefing, is asked by a reporter about the case of the Salvadoran man, Kilmar Garcia. Garcia was the individual who was basically taken from Maryland. I think that's where he was. He came to the United States when he was 16 years old. He was fleeing gang violence in El Salvador, so to send him back there is especially cruel. The administration claimed that he was a leader of MS-13. This is not what any of the records of this man say is true. They basically made it up. J.D. Vance tweeted it out and then had to fact check himself as he thought he was dunking on a reporter, just to show the level of seriousness with which this administration is engaging with just destroying people's lives here. But here she is being asked about this case.
Right, sure.
Thanks, Caroline. A few questions about this deportation case. First, I wanted to clarify something that you said to Jeff a few minutes ago. You said you'd seen evidence that this man was a convicted gang member. In what court was he convicted and for what?
This individual was an MS-13 ringleader. This individual was also engaged in human trafficking. And I'm glad you brought up this point again, because I would like to point out that if you just saw the headline from the insane, failing Atlantic magazine this morning, you would think this individual was Father of the Year, living in Maryland, living a peaceful life, when that couldn't be further from the truth. They didn't even mention in the title of that article, or even in the first paragraph, that this individual is an illegal criminal who broke our nation's immigration laws. He is a leader in the brutal MS-13 gang, and he is involved in human trafficking, and now MS-13 is a designated foreign terrorist organization. Foreign terrorists have no legal protections in the United States of America, and this administration is going to continue to deport foreign terrorists and illegal criminals from our nation's interior.
But a judge ordered that he should remain in this country. So are you saying that it is okay to ignore a judge's ruling if you don't like it?
Who does that judge work for?
He's an immigration
It was an
judge.
immigration judge who works for the Department of Justice at the direction of the Attorney General of the United States, whose name is Pam Bondi, who has committed to eradicating MS-13 from our nation's interior. And let me tell you why we've made this commitment. MS-13, may I remind each and every one of you, is a brutal and vicious gang. They raped and strangled a 20-year-old autistic woman to death in Maryland. They hacked 4 people to death with machetes in a park on Long Island. They have kidnapped, sexually tortured, and shot a teenage girl in Texas after she insulted them. None of this is relevant.
Okay, got it. Every immigrant is implicated in the death of Laken Riley, apparently, according to Stephen Miller in this administration. This man, because he is from El Salvador and was literally fleeing the gang that they're claiming he was a part of, is implicated in their crimes apparently as well, and that he's not this Father of the Year. Where is she getting this from? And by the way, check in with the rest of the administration before you go out there on a limb, because they have already admitted that this was an error, but they're just like winking and saying, too bad, we can't get him back. We defied a court order and said we couldn't turn the plane around. The court was saying, hey, these folks need due process. We need to determine whether they are who you say they are, which includes violent criminals and gang members. Hey, turn this plane around. And they said, the plane's already in the air. We've got like maritime law, sky law. Just a middle finger to the courts.
Then Leavitt knows when she says he is a criminal illegal, what she means is to make the civil infraction of, saying, overstaying a visa or whatever, coming into this country undocumented, as a crime. It's not.
Abrego Garcia, the Baltimore Banner writes, was a unionized sheet metal worker trying to advance his career by enrolling in a college course to obtain a professional license, according to CASA's statement issued Tuesday. The family was also seeking specialized care for their autistic nonverbal son, who was on a waiting list at the Children's Hospital. Here is a report from CBS this morning interviewing his wife. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Russ.
She also says in that clip that the immigration judge who issued the ruling that he should not be deported works for the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, which basic civics would tell you that that's not the case.
That they are attempting to beat the entire judicial system into submission. They're doing this by going after private, well-connected law firms, and also by targeting judges politically. Thankfully, when it comes to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, we had a great result last night. But like on this issue, they are exploiting the destruction of our fundamental civil rights that really began in this iteration in the post 9/11 world during the War on Terror, including the classifications of people broadly as terrorists, to give them no due process, to rip them away from their families. And they're pairing that with our purposefully burdensome immigration system that doesn't give folks like Kilmar and his family the ability to get permanent citizenship status because the Republicans are so nativist, and because, frankly, there's a whole class of our economy that benefits from a lot of folks not being under, in secret, living their lives here so they can steal their wages. Wage theft is one of the biggest forms of theft in this country. They can pay them sub-minimum wage. They can use deportation as a threat if they speak up again about workplace abuse. That's part of this whole here. But here is his wife talking about who this man actually is.
Waited and waited. He never made that call.
Jennifer says when her husband, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was detained and mistakenly deported by immigration authorities in March, he told her he could be sent to Secot, the notorious Salvadorian prison.
I was scared. I was very scared.
Why?
Because I've seen news of that prison, and I knew they take criminals there, and my husband's not a criminal.
Abrego Garcia was granted legal status protecting him from deportation back to El Salvador in 2019 because of safety concerns in his home country. Jennifer says he continued to check in with immigration officials until he was stopped by ICE on March 12 in Maryland. Just days later, Jennifer saw this photo of Abrego Garcia inside Secot.
When I saw it, I immediately broke down because I knew it was him.
What was your biggest fear when you identified him?
I was scared for his life.
In court documents filed Monday, the government said although ICE was aware of his protection from removal, Abrego Garcia was removed to El Salvador because of an administrative error. Now that he's out of the country, officials say they have no jurisdiction to bring him back.
The error that you are referring to was a clerical error. It was an administrative error.
The Trump administration acknowledged the mistake, but defended Abrego Garcia's deportation.
He is a leader in the brutal MS-13 gang, and he is involved in human trafficking.
The White House did not detail any evidence that proves those allegations. Jennifer says her husband is not a gang member, but instead just a proud father of their 5-year-old son with disabilities.
He's not a criminal. My husband is an amazing person, an amazing father.
Court.
There you go. So all of this stuff really does tie in with our police state. And in during the pandemic, the bipartisan, frankly, push to be tough on crime, it also was in conjunction with the Democrats completely ceding the issue on immigration and saying, oh, you know, there's this complete epidemic of crime in our cities, right? And it didn't take long for the Republicans, who already had their base primed to believe that immigrants were criminals. Donald Trump came down that escalator in the 2016 campaign, and he immediately said, these Mexicans, they're rapists, they're criminals, and some, I assume, are good people.
And that was before the so-called invasion of like 3 or 4 years ago that people claim is warrant for this sort of shit.
Right. And so you have this toxic stew of what I mentioned before. The war on terror eroding people's civil liberties, expanding the surveillance state, the precedent of Guantanamo Bay, of giving people no due process just because you classify them as terrorists. Also the unitary executive theory being tested under Bush that Donald Trump is now pushing to the limit, or pushing past our institutions' limits, almost. The nearly decade of Republican politics with very little opposition on the liberal side of conflating immigrants and criminals. Although there was more opposition in Trump 1.0 until they ceded the issue after the first term, basically. Remember how there were protests about the Muslim ban? That kind of thing. But you see how politics are not static and you can't be ruled by poll numbers because things change when based on what politicians say and what they do. So you have that combination. And the tough on crime stuff that was being pushed by Republicans, by, frankly, the algorithms on the internet that act to elevate really bloody or content that makes people angry. That's what this has proven. And with this right-wing capture of our social media channels, it has manufactured consent for the idea that these are really some bad hombres that we need to basically mass incarcerate. And then put that with our decades of using gang ties and police being given broad capacity, which frankly should be illegal without evidence, because being in a gang should not be illegal. It should be the act that comes from it that can be criminalized if you do a violent act or you steal something, whatever. But using a gang database so that they can basically round up poor black and brown people in our cities when they feel like it. This has been a long-standing practice, and it's been called racist by many civil rights organizations. Oregon had did away with it around 10 years ago because it was something like the 60 plus 65, 70% of people in their gang database was black, and it's less than 10% of the population. Now, the right wing would say, oh, they're inherently criminal. But then we go back to this story. They're calling this man a criminal. They're saying that that gay hairdresser that they had to deport to El Salvador, to a prison labor camp, to a gulag, they're saying he is a criminal. And then when they're forced to acknowledge it, they say it's an administrative error. So you've made an error, but you're not going to correct it. Why? Because this policy of attacking immigrants and demonizing people so they can get away with tax cuts for the rich, that takes precedence over this man's humanity. In any other situation, Donald Trump was charged over 90 charges, and he got away with it because he's rich and powerful. And he still claims to be the victim, over and over, whining about how horrible everybody has been to him. But when this man is ripped away from his family and his life that he's known since he was a teenager and deported to a prison camp in the country that he was fleeing from because he was afraid of the violence there, oh, what do you know? It's an administrative error. What can we do? We're powerless all of a sudden. We're so strong and powerful to round up all these guys. But then when we made a mistake, well, we're completely powerless. How dare you ask us to do anything about it?
I have to say, the thing where we see 4K footage and drone footage of these prisons, but then when somebody is sent there accidentally, we're told we can't do anything about it, there should be way more alarm about what's going on. How do we know that these people are still alive and have been shot and put in a ditch by Bukele? There's no assurance that can be made about any of that. And to the extent that we can't find them, might as well be if they're just going to be caged forever. And the other thing about with gangs, how was gang violence solved in the LA in the 1990s? It wasn't through massive brute force cop work. It was through a truce by diplomacy between the gang members themselves. MS-13 and Tren de Aragua both originated in fucking prisons. this is not a solution to this problem. It exacerbates them. Like you don't solve gang violence by just locking up every person who can be associated with a gang. You solve gang violence by ameliorating the issues in society that cause people to look to gangs for protection and sort of like material like sort of reasons.
Benefit.
It's the same reason why, like, how do we solve the issue of, say, Palestinians looking towards Hamas? Well, what isn't helping them is the 75-year occupation and keeping them in a refugee refugee status and without a state for that long. Like, you can't solve this stuff through brute force. But all these people want to suggest that actually maybe we can. Let's just throw more bombs at the issue. Let's just throw more cages at the issue, and eventually we'll solve it. It's a fucking joke.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.